Hello, my name is Connor Zapponi. I'm the operations manager here at Echo, otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. Thank you for participating in today's community conversation, HOA document management and protection. Echo is a 51-year-old statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and connections. For today's event, we have a few housekeeping items. These are now presented on your screens. They were also provided in the slide deck sent prior to this meeting. Please take a moment to review our housekeeping items. Today, we have a large audience of HOA board members. We will do our best to answer your questions, but may run out of time and may not get to all of them. At the prerogative of the presenters, they may answer some questions during their presentations or hold off to answer them all during the Q&A section at the end of the presentation. We will answer as many questions as we can get to, so just hold them off until the end of the presentation. In addition to the live Q&A session, I will be answering some of the Echo-related questions or easier to answer questions in text while the presentation is going on. To prioritize your questions during the Q&A section at the end of the presentation, you can upvote your favorite questions by heading into the Q&A feature located on the bottom bar and clicking the thumbs up icon that's located at the bottom left of each question. This will give us a tally and vote and let us prioritize the questions to the ones that you want answered the most. Also, please keep your questions short and general in nature. We may have to pass over some questions if they get too specific about your association. For other issues or technical issues, you can use the chat feature. The chat feature is primarily used if you are having trouble with the audio, where I can help you with that, or if you have questions or comments or you want to talk to other participants that are on today's webinar. We do not monitor the chat feature for questions. Please place all questions in the Q&A. That way that we can keep that upvote and make sure that we're getting to the best questions that we want answered. Now let me direct your attention to your monitor where you will find our disclaimer. None of what is said during this seminar shall be construed as specific legal or expert advice from the speakers, sponsors, or Echo. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to contact your attorney or another suitable expert. The information we provide during this webinar is educational in nature and should not be relied upon for specific decision-making purposes. Thank you. This webinar, as well as all of our events, are made possible by the generous support of Echo HOA professional service providers. Please join me in thanking today's sponsors. Our program sponsor, BTC, Bob Tedrick Construction Incorporated. Our registration sponsors, Levy Erlinger and Company LLC CPAs and Collins Management. And today we will also have 2 gift card giveaways that will be presented at the end of the presentation. And those are sponsored by Cal Pro Construction and Painting, as well as CM Squared. If you want a chance to win those $50 Amazon gift cards, you got to stay till the very end. And it is a roll call for the winners. So you do have to say you're here. We will now hear a brief word from BTC. Actually, there we go. Now we will hear a brief word from BTC.
Integrity, quality, and service. These are the key principles that my company was founded on that drive our business in serving families like yours. My name is Bob Tedrick. I'm the president and founder of BTC, Bob Tedrick Construction, specializing in single-family residential remodels, commercial tenant improvements, and multifamily HOA and apartment community properties. We do 90% of our work using our own in-house employees. Look, we love this community. We're Livermore local, family owned and operated since 2008. When you work with us, you're family.
I want to say thank you to BTC, as well as all of our sponsors that are on today's webinar. They make this educational programming possible at little or no cost to you, the attendee. And now for a bit about today's presenters. Sonia Bacchus was a portfolio association manager for 18 years and has recently retired from management to work full-time as the CEO of Bimini, a company that provides simple, effective software solutions for association management challenges. In her spare time, she loves to sail, travel with her family, and work on her 10-acre farm. Our other presenter today is Amy Tinetti, Esquire. She is a shareholder at Hughes Gill Cochran Tinetti. Since 2004, Amy has represented homeowner associations in all aspects of their corporate operations. Her practice includes governing document analysis, interpretation, revision and enforcement, elections and governance, real property and title issues, special assessments, and resolution of member disputes. Ms. Tinetti is heavily involved with several industry organizations. She serves in leadership roles and is a frequent speaker and author at the local, state, and national levels. I want to say thank you to Sonia and Amy for being here today, and I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Connor. So I think the first slide is mine. Get there. Thank you. Okay, so why are we here today? Well, because associations, even small associations, have lots and lots of documents. And some are subject to disclosure, some are not. But all the more reason to have those documents organized and managed in a way that when you get requests, and you will get requests, and we'll talk about the two most common types of requests that associations deal with, you know where the documents are and you can easily package them in order to disclose them. The other thing is that the timelines for complying with these types of requests, which we're going to talk about more specifically, but they can be really short. So the organization and management of association documents is incredibly important. And Sonia, I would just say, as a manager for 18 years, what was your experience with that? Because I know that's sort of prompted you to go into your current profession. A lot about documents, right?
Yes. So being, boots on the ground, seeing the difficulties that associations and managers go through to produce those documents. I was prompted within my company and then originally as a manager to try and find efficient solutions, which is why we're tying this to technology, because there are a lot of technology solutions out there that can make that document production process so much simpler, especially for the board. So that's what we're here to hopefully discuss today and give you guys some valuable tools to be able to more efficiently comply with all of those crazy requests that we get. Okay, slide 2. So for today's topics, we're going to cover 4 major, and actually when Amy and I were chatting yesterday, we actually added in a 5th. So the areas we're going to cover today are, excuse me?
It'll be a surprise. Stay till the end.
Surprise, yes. Yeah, we had all kinds of things that we wanted to include, but we don't have enough time for all of that. So we're going to try and make sure we cover what we can as well as possible. So today's topics: member communications. There have been some changes in the last year regarding that. So we definitely wanted to make sure you had some tools for understanding and managing member communications. Escrow document requirements. What are you required? What is the seller required to provide? Record requests, which some of you may have dealt with in the past. Those are extensive and can be extremely painful. So we want to look at ways to make that more efficient. And then lastly, when Dave Zapponi and I were first talking about doing this webinar, he mentioned that a lot of the ECHO members are looking at becoming and or sustaining being a Firewise USA community. So I do have a little bit of background in that, and we've thought that that would be valuable. And then lastly, our surprise topic, which we'll get to at the end. All right, next slide. So member communications. So there are new statutory requirements as of 2023. Associations are required to deliver documents in accordance with the preferred delivery method specified for the member. And if the member has not provided a preferred delivery method by traditional mail. So they also, in addition to that, have to solicit annually. The association has to solicit annually for their choice. So not only do associations now have to ask the member on an annual basis, how would you like your communications? They have to comply with that. So it used to be in the past, as a manager, we would say everybody is getting their annual budget packet via US mail, because then we didn't have to think about it. We knew that everybody was getting it. We knew we had complied with what was required. That is no longer the case. If a member in writing says to the association or the association's managing agent that they would like that budget by email, or they would like it by mail, or they would like it by both, the association now has to separate all of those lists. So you have to have your group that wants it via email, your group that wants it via mail, and your group that wants it via both. If there is no preference, the default is to the last known mailing address that is on file, or if there is no mailing address on file, to the actual property address. As I mentioned, this change is a big burden for associations to manage, having to, number one, solicit, obtain the information, and then sort those lists and make sure that you're complying correctly with those member preferences for their communications, is a big burden. So you need to make sure that you are paying attention to this, and we're hoping to give you some tools to make that process easier.
And next Sonia, slide. There can also be two mailing addresses. I mean, they could say, we want it sent to these two mailing addresses. There can be a secondary mailing address. So there's a lot here, and that's been the law for quite a while. But the new piece of this is that associations are now required to solicit this information, whereas previously the burden was more on the members, and now the burden is really on the association to at least try to get the information. We can't force people to give it to us, but they have to request it. They have to solicit it.
And it goes kind of down a rabbit hole. You know, that's not just a secondary mailing address. There could be a secondary email address.
Exactly.
It could be a legal representative. So it kind of keeps going.
And we've got a sample of the kind of the form we're talking about. So we'll talk about that in a little more specifics in a little bit. But we can talk about general versus individual delivery right now. So when statutes, and I'm primarily talking about, well, I actually am just talking about the Davis-Sterling Common Interest Development Act, that lovely piece of legislation that we deal with day in and day out, at least I do. So when the statutes are written, they will, and it's something to do with notice, and this is fairly new too, they will either say notice has to be provided by general notice, and that has to be provided by general delivery. So, and then, or they have to provide individual notice, which is provided by individual delivery. So what the heck does that mean? When we're talking about general delivery methods, that's covered in Civil Code Section 4045. And there are several ways that general delivery or general notice can be provided. They can be provided in a billing statement, electronically, i.e. via email. It can be by mail. It can be by newsletter, and it can be posted in a prominent location within the community. or it can be on a website. There's actually another one. If an association has a TV broadcast, which I've only ever worked with one that does, general notice can be provided by TV broadcast. Important to note on the last two that the location within the community or the website, that has to be specifically noted in the annual policy statement that is distributed to the members in one of these forms, depending on their preference, every year. So if it's going to be at the mailboxes, for example, you need to say it's going to be at the mailboxes. If it's the website, you've got to say, here's the address for the website where general notices will be posted.
And Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but most attorneys with posting, documents or notices that are specific for member communications on a website, the recommendation is that that's behind some type of member login, correct? Just not posted out in general.
Sure. I mean, it's going to depend. It's kind of going to depend on what it is. But yes, most of those things should be in sort of a member login type situation. One other important thing before we go on to individual delivery to note is that members can request to receive all general notices via individual delivery. So there's that option too. So what are we talking about when we talk about individual delivery? Well, that's mail or email, and mail can, I don't believe the member can choose, but the association, in terms of sending things by mail, it can be certified, can be express, can be first class mail, can be overnight delivery, anything like that is covered under mail. So one thing that when Sonia and I were talking about this, sometimes this stuff, I mean, it's kind of clear as mud, but there's one area where it's particularly complicated that I just want to note. So we've got laws regarding elections and election by acclamation. A lot of election notices can be provided by general delivery, or general notice can be provided. So the call for candidates can be by general notice. The ballots have to be by individual delivery, but a lot of the sort of pre-ballot stuff can be by general notice. But the law requires that in order to take advantage of election by acclamation, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, when I say election by acclamation, I mean there's 3 seats open and only 3 people running, or actually 2 people running. So you know what the results are because you don't have more people running than there are seats available. There's a lot of other requirements that we won't go into today, but just know that one of the requirements is that call for candidates. If you're going to take advantage of the election by acclamation option, that has to be by individual notice. So that means you're going to be spending more, FYI, because if you're in a large association, it's not cheap, especially if you're mailing things to people. Next slide, Connor. So this is the form that we were talking about. And I use that term form loosely. The statute, and it's really Civil Code Section 4041, says this is all the stuff that an association has to distribute, has to solicit annually. But they don't give us a form. We have another form where David Sterling actually does give us the form. This one, they just say, here's the stuff you have to get every year. There's a couple things I want to note on this form. The first is, in the first paragraph, it says that the association has to solicit this at least 30 days. Oh, fancy. At least 30 days before the association makes its own annual disclosures to the membership. But this form is actually part of the annual policy statement. Now, I don't think there's any harm in doing that. You could, I mean, doing it a year before, really, if you're doing it, let's just say in the 2024 annual policy statement, well, that's at least 30 days before you're making the annual disclosures for 2025. But you could do it separately. It doesn't have to be part of the annual policy statement. You just need to make sure that your association is doing it whatever the timing is, and it just has to be at least 30 days. And again, that can be pretty fluid before the association has to make its annual disclosures. I think, by the way, the reason for this 30-day thing is, well, let's find out from people how they want to receive stuff before we send this huge packet of documents out. But once you do that the first time, it absolutely makes sense to include this in the annual policy statement. The other thing,
and that's how we did it that first year, Amy, when I was managing, when the statute was changing, we sent that first disclosure out separately to comply with it, and then since that time forward, it just became part of the policy packet.
Yeah, so. And I think that's great, because it's a bunch of documents, and again, it's difficult to send this stuff, especially in large associations. It's a burden. So I absolutely get that. The other thing I wanted to mention is item 4 on this. It's really, this thing can be tailored for your association is what I want to say. In 4, the statute actually says you have to ask if it's owner occupied, it's rented, it's developed but vacant, or it's undeveloped. Well, when I've prepared these for associations, and I know of an association is completely built out and has been since 1972, I am not going to ask whether the property is undeveloped, because we know it's not. So why ask a question when you know the answer? So this can be tailored. The other thing that I would suggest you consider in terms of tailoring this form is consider including a question about whether people want to opt out of the membership list. And the reason I bring that up is, as of 2020, January 1 of 2020, the definition of membership list was changed to include email addresses. So in this document, we're kind of we are soliciting email addresses if people want to provide them. And I think it makes sense, if people are providing email addresses, to inform them, hey, if you give us your email address, it's going to go on the membership list. And do you want to opt out of the membership list so that you're not getting communications from other members when via email when the membership list is requested and provided? Because we'll get there down in a little bit about documents that members are entitled to. But one of them is the membership list. And I just think people probably don't want to get those emails. And if they do, great, then they don't opt out. And understand, there's no affirmative obligation on the part of the association to ask people if they want to opt out. People have the right to opt out if they want to, but we don't have an affirmative obligation as associations to ask. I just think there might be some blowback if we don't tell people, hey, this is one of the things that happens if you provide an email address, because guess who's going to get yelled at if someone gets a communication from their neighbor that they didn't expect and don't want? It's going to be the management company or whoever provided the membership list, because they didn't really know what it meant to provide their email address. So that's just a practice pointer that we've been talking to our clients about in terms of this form.
Yeah, and we had a great discussion yesterday, again, from a manager's perspective. Members don't always know that they have that ability to opt out. And as Amy mentioned, those surprises are not pleasant, and that blowback is not fun to deal with. So giving them the information and including it on this form can be, really valuable. You know, whether or not they want to be included in a membership directory. The one that you mentioned from the previous, though, Amy, was one that I thought was interesting, because you said a member can request to receive general delivery by individual delivery.
Yes.
We're not required to ask them that question, right?
Correct.
And that's probably not one we do want to ask.
I would not.
Because
I would not recommend that on
that's
this form.
going to be another can of worms, right? We want everybody to be able to walk to the bulletin board and see, you know, the posted agenda without having to mail it to the one person who put on the form that they wanted individual delivery for that general.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Yep. The other thing we talked about was other issues with email. You know, many associations, either with a management company or using an accounting system, have some type of member portal. And if a member is putting their emails into a member portal, you know, does that constitute their email being included in the membership list? And in most cases, it probably does. So adding that member opt-out, I think, to this form would be valuable.
Yeah, I think emails are very fuzzy right now, because they can be collected in a number of ways. I think there's no question that if an email is collected via this annual solicitation, that gets included on the membership list. But there may be other things that aren't quite as clear in terms of email. And as Sonia and I were discussing yesterday, this isn't a topic that we intend to discuss a lot today, but it appears as though electronic voting is going to be an option as of January 1 of 2025. It's looking very, very likely. All the more reason that associations have their email ducks in a row, because that is going to be a big deal if we can start voting via email in less than a year.
Yeah, that ability to utilize electronic voting is a game changer for associations and for managers, because that process, especially for director elections, is so cumbersome.
Yes.
But then, as Amy mentioned, you know, making sure that we have a way to formally capture those emails and show that the member actually, you know, gave us that information through this form or through some type of an online system where they agreed to the process, is going to be super valuable to move towards that electronic election.
Yep.
All right. So technology solutions. So as painful as it might be to have to split these things up, as far as who receives information via mail, via email, via both, there are solutions available. There are numerous electronic notification systems for email messaging. So once you have solicited and received that annual owner preference, communication preference back from your owners, there are systems like MailChimp, Constant Contact. Most are very reasonable in cost, that can allow you to utilize that email blast to your members that have agreed to receive that information via email. You can use your association website. As we mentioned, that is one of the ways that general delivery is allowed. Again, to reiterate, you want to make sure that it is behind a member login, just in case there is information that should be just for members. And I think, as Amy and I were talking yesterday, you know, using these technology solutions, and especially your website, to prepare for those communications and or those document requests is a great way to be up to speed and up to date. So make sure, if you have a website, that it is up to date. If you've amended your governing documents, make sure that it's the right governing documents that are up there. Make sure that you have 12 months of board approved minutes that are up there, if that's what you guys are posting. So it's very important you keep that website up to date. Electronic mailing systems, such as South Data, will actually, do the mailings for you. Those are great tools. When I started as a manager 19 years ago, we spent 2 days a year where the whole office stopped, where we were actually stuffing budget envelopes for all, and stamping and labeling. And so there are tools out there that make that process much more efficient if you guys are still processing a lot through paper mail. And then there are electronic systems that manage owner preferences. There's a system that we developed that actually walks through all of those questions that are on that solicitation that can help you manage those preferences, and then provides those lists, being able to sort out who wants mail, who wants email, who wants both, and then managing those, member opt-out as well. So there are a lot that are available to utilize and to make these burdensome requirements a lot easier for you as board members and managers to handle. So, all right, we are on to the next slide.
Okay, so I mentioned that we were going to talk about document disclosures in kind of two contexts, and this is the first one. So the associations are asked frequently to provide documents especially when a property is sold or is being sold, or someone is refinancing. So the question is, what does the seller have to disclose? That's intentionally written that way, because I just want to make clear to everyone that an association's legal relationship is with its members. Which means record owners, those people whose names are on the deeds. It does not have a legal relationship with prospective purchasers, does not have a legal relationship with lenders, does not have a legal relationship with real estate agents. So in the context of, well, in all contexts, but the one we're talking about here, in the context of a purchase and sale, the relationship is with the seller. The relationship that the association has is with the seller. So the seller has to ask the association for documents. And that request, by the way, must be in writing. That's under Civil Code Section 4530. The association has to provide the requested documents within 10 days of the request. Now I said, and we're going to talk about what the documents are, but as I said, the relationship is with the seller. One caveat is that the seller can authorize disclosure to a third-party recipient. So the seller can say, I authorize Sonia to receive these documents on my behalf. That must be in writing as well, by the way. And the documents that can be requested are all of the documents listed in Civil Code Section 4525, which we're actually kind of gonna look at on the next slide. So I won't go into a bunch of detail. The other thing I want to talk about here, though, is lender questionnaires. So, and we said yes or no, and Sonia and I have had a lot of discussion about this, and we both have pretty strong feelings about it. So at the outset, let me just say, because I remember there's no legal relationship between the association and lenders. There's also no statutory requirement that associations fill out lender questionnaires. The statutory requirements are the ones we're talking about right now. There are certain documents that have to be provided to a seller or the person that the seller designates upon request. None of those have to do with lender questionnaires. And really the stuff that's asked for in lender questionnaires is completely different than the documents that sellers are entitled to. So
can we just stop for just a second before we get into our, huge opinions about lender questionnaires? So you have an association board member that comes to you and says, we have an owner who's selling, and they've requested us to provide them with all of this. So how do you handle that process? What do you tell them to do? You ask them for that delivery in writing, and then you, okay.
Yeah, the statute actually requires that it be in writing. So ask them in writing, and it has to be in writing, and it has to specify the documents that are requested. Unless it's all of the documents under 4525, okay, then those are the ones we have to provide. Okay. Did I miss anything else on that, Sonia?
Nope, not at all. I just wanted to make sure that, boards were clear as to how to process those requests, especially if it's not going through a management company.
Right. Okay, so in my experience, so we've had lender questionnaires forever, and there was a big, I don't know when it was, because you could tell me it was yesterday, you could tell me it was 10 years ago, and I'd be like, okay. But there was a big push years ago about lender questionnaires asking about how many were owner occupied, how many rentals were there, what was the situation in terms of delinquencies. So those we've been dealing with for a while, and I think I would guess 99.9% of those get answered, even though it's not a legal requirement. But the questionnaires have gotten more onerous and honestly more scary. And that's because of the Surfside, the collapse of the condominium building in Florida. So after that happened, especially Fannie and Freddie, especially were behind this, and changed the lender questionnaires to ask for a lot of things, including, what kind of inspections have been done? Do you have any knowledge of safety issues? Do you think there will be any safety issues in the future? I mean, stuff that's really, really, again, scary from a lawyer's perspective. So we tell our clients, you don't have an obligation to respond you don't have an obligation to fill these out. There's risk in filling these out because you're taking on a duty that doesn't otherwise exist if you fill this out, which means you're potentially increasing your liability risk. And we always get, well, if their sale falls through, we're going to get sued. Well, I would much rather defend the lawsuit that you complied with the law and you didn't provide documents that you're not required to provide, rather than you provided some things, but they were misleading, and you knew about this and you should have provided that. Because that's the risk when you start taking on more responsibility than you legally have. So my suggestion for you all is, as a board, discuss what you want to do with these. If you've got a management company, discuss it with your management company. And if you decide not to respond, it might be that you want to explain to the members, hey, we've made a decision not to respond to these, and here's why. And we've written those communications for clients before. But it really should be a board decision on whether you're going to respond to what, if you are, and if you are going to respond, to what extent. But just know it's not a legal requirement. As much as they push it at you, you have to fill this out. That's not accurate. That's just not legally accurate. Anything I missed there, Sonia?
No. Amy and I think this was the biggest part of our discussion yesterday, because we both wholeheartedly agree, from different perspectives. As a manager, we would get the frantic calls from title saying, you have to fill out this Wells Fargo questionnaire or this loan is not going through. And I can honestly say in all of my years of managing, I never heard that a loan did not go through because we refused to answer a specific question or fill out a lender proprietary questionnaire. So, be very careful. The questions can be really vague. They can be worded wrong. And if it's answered incorrectly and something is worded that says, no, we don't think there's any safety issues, and then something happens, that is just a huge liability for the association. So I agree with Amy. No on lender questionnaires. It's not required.
Or if yes, talk to legal counsel and figure out what your approach is going to be.
For sure. Okay, I think we're on to our form. So this is the Davis Sterling form, and this, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, but this is straight out of statute. So it is very specific. This form has to go back with the documents that the seller is providing, or you as the association to the seller to provide to the buyer. We call them the Big 21. And they are, basically your governing documents, but they are separated: articles, bylaws, CC&Rs, if you have operating rules. And then there are other items that do apply or don't apply. They ask whether you have a settlement notice. If you are not in construction defect or haven't completed construction defect, that isn't going to apply. But the form says that you have to say not applicable. It has to tell the disclosure has to include if there was a cost to the document, and if it wasn't included, why isn't it there? It's not available, it's not applicable, or it's included somewhere else. This disclosure does include a questionnaire certification, because many management companies are providing that, but you have to show that it was purchased, and you have to show the total cost for what those documents cost. And then many management companies will include the reserve study. That is not a requirement. The reserve disclosure as part of the budget packet is required. And again, Amy, correct me if I'm incorrect on any of this. But if I was a buyer looking in an association, the first two things I would be asking for were the reserve study and the annual budget. So we've always felt that the reserve study could be a valuable tool for anyone looking to purchase within an association. Again,
Sonia, real
absolutely.
quick, I just want to make clear to the audience that the first two columns are the statutory part, and then this has been filled out. The last two columns have been filled out, but in the statute it's blank. The law does not tell you how much you can charge.
Yes, great clarification, and that actually leads us into another great discussion that Amy and I had yesterday. Do you charge for documents as an association? Many management companies do. And Amy looked up the statute yesterday, and it's clear, but it leaves some wiggle room. It says that you can charge for the preparation, production, distribution of, basically, am I kind of
procurement, preparation, reproduction, and delivery of the
documents.
But you can't charge an additional fee for electronic delivery in lieu of a hard copy delivery.
Oh, okay. So clarifying that, meaning you can't charge them more if you're delivering it electronically. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. Not really sure what they mean by that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if you got it electronically, you can't say, "Oh, it took us forever to put this together for you, and we're going to charge you $50."
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So some associations do charge, but it should be reasonable. Some associations don't charge. and provide that documentation at no cost.
And this is actually a fairly new requirement in terms of, I mean, for someone who's been doing this for 20 years, I guess that's all relative, but we didn't used to have to say how much things were going to cost. And now we have to tell them how much things are going to cost. Yeah.
Right, because not only is this form included in the actual document packet for escrow, but it's also a disclosure, right? That the association has to disclose on an annual basis that says, we charge $25 for the CC&Rs.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Did I miss anything on this slide, Amy?
I don't think so.
Okay. We are on to technology solutions. So there are numerous technology solutions for escrow document delivery. Many have been around for a while. HomeWise, CondoCert was a, I don't know, maybe still is, a Mutual of Omaha company that originally was processing escrow documentation many years ago. HomeWise split off from them, and they offer electronic services, including, you know, the processing and storing of the documents. There's a system called DocLine, which is a simpler system that allows for easily managing those documents and just providing instant escrow document delivery. Some of the bigger companies are providing many more services as far as filling out lender questionnaires and providing some of that end-to-end escrow processing. So there are numerous systems out there available, and some of them are at no cost for the association. So if this is an area that you're struggling with, or that you need help with, there are numerous solutions out there. Would encourage you to send me an email, and I'm happy to get in touch with you. But yes, there are simple solutions to solving this problem that make it much more efficient for boards. And again, you know, as Amy and I discussed yesterday, so much of this is about preparation. You know, if you have those documents already together and available, and you're updating them when minutes get approved and or your annual financials are completed, then you're going to be way ahead of the game and be able to provide these documents in a timely manner as required. And as Amy mentioned, these escrow documents are required to be delivered within 10 days. So, all right, we are on to the next subject, which is so fun: record requests.
Yeah, and actually, as we were approaching this slide, I thought, holy moly, we could actually talk about this one slide for an hour pretty easily. Right. And we have, I think, just a little more than 15 minutes, and then we go to Q&A. So I'm going to try to make this really quick because we have two other subjects to cover. So. Yep. Say record requests, we're talking about record requests from members. So members are making a request of the association the statute says inspect and copy records. So Civil Code Section 5200 lists all the documents that members are entitled to inspect and copy. So the process is actually a little more vague than the escrow disclosure arena. In terms of how documents get requested, there's no requirement that a request be in writing, except for two things, and that is the membership list and election materials, like the ballots, and because those can be inspected after, if someone wants to look at the ballots after an election. Those two requests have to be in writing, but in my experience, these requests are always in writing, because otherwise we really don't know what people are asking for. But just know that someone could make an oral request for records at a meeting, for example, and it would be a valid request unless it was just these two. Now, I don't have a problem saying, can you put your request in writing, just so we're all clear on what you're looking for. I don't think that is too much to ask. So the question that comes up I want to really quickly talk about what documents are on the list and then what documents aren't on the list. So again, it's Civil Code Section 5200, minutes from the beginning of time, by the way, for open board meetings. So if your community has been around again since 1972, technically someone could ask for minutes of open board meetings from 1972 on. Thank God I've never gotten that kind of request, because I don't think any of my clients could comply with such a request. But that is what the law says. A lot of financial records are on the list that's in 5200 of the Civil Code. Executed contracts are included. But let's also talk really briefly about what's not included. Executive session minutes, members don't have the right to request and obtain. Correspondence, we get that all the time. I want all the letters, I want all the emails. No, they don't get that. They don't get copies of bids. A lot of times bids contain proprietary information, so they don't get copies of bids. If a bid becomes an executed contract, then yes, they get the executed contract, but not copies of bids. And again, I can go on and on about what is included and what's not included. I will just say that when lawyers get involved, it's because these requests can sometimes be very vague, very broad. And when we're asked to look at one, we're saying you have to provide these things, you don't have to provide these things. So that's when we get involved. Can the association charge? This comes up all the time. The law is very specific. So it's 5205G of the Civil Code. It says that the association can, well, actually it's F and G. F says that the association can bill the member for the direct and actual costs of copying and mailing. So just copying, if you charge 20 cents a page, you can charge that. By the way, you need to tell them in advance, and they have to agree to pay those charges. And then in addition to the actual cost of copying and mailing, they can bill the requested member $10 per hour, not to exceed $200 total for the time to redact documents. So anything that may lead to identity theft, account numbers, things like that on the financial records, anything that may lead to disclosure of personal information, that all gets redacted, but there's a limit on how much we can charge to redact those documents. So a lot of times we'll be asked, well, our management company is going to have to spend hours looking through the records, getting this stuff together. Yeah, you can't charge for that. That's just a cost, unfortunately, of doing business that the association has to absorb. And in terms of process, there are short time frames to respond. So one more pitch for get this stuff organized so that you're ready to go if you get a request. Current fiscal year, they get records within 10 business days. So, and then previous 2 fiscal years, which doesn't apply to the minutes, but applies to everything else on the list. Those have to be provided within 30 calendar days. So just know they can't go back 15 years on all this stuff. You can only ask for current fiscal year and previous 2 fiscal years, the one exception being the open meeting minutes. Those are forever and ever. So Sonia, why don't you talk about how the process can be made easier, technology solutions, and then I want to just give a couple little practice pointers.
Love it. So process easier for all. So, let's be real. If the association has a record request, there is most likely some kind of dispute going on. And it's probably a homeowner who is not happy with something and maybe not happy with the board. So there's already a lot of emotion that gets charged into these record requests. Set that aside as a board member, because you have to comply. And the biggest thing you can do to make it easier is take the emotion out of it and think of it as a business transaction. Somebody has requested this information. You are required to provide it and process it, and do your best to do that without being angry at the owner that is costing the association time, money, and energy. So that's tip number one.
I love it.
Again, keep up to date. Make sure that you are prepared so that you can more readily turn this information around within those required timeframes. I can't stress enough the monthly financials. You as a board are required to review and approve monthly financials. Even if you're only meeting quarterly, you're supposed to be looking at those financials on a monthly basis, and they're supposed to include a bank statement. Make sure you have those. Make sure you have them in an electronic copy or a hard copy that you're keeping in a binder. Gone are the days where the treasurer could say we have, $2,000 in operating and $20,000 in reserves and, motion to approve. You need to have those financial monthly records available, because that's most likely going to be one of the biggest things that this owner is looking for, besides the minutes, most typically. Technology solutions. So many management companies have electronic accounting systems now. Many of those now have member portals and or board portals that allow for you to post those documents through that system. So systems like Vantica, TOPS, Appfolio, those larger technology, all-encompassing systems have a way for you to continue to post monthly financials, minutes, updates to your governing docs, changes to your rules. So utilize those. Again, the association website, we've talked about that. Keep those up to date. And then there are other, proprietary independent electronic document management systems. I had a conversation with another association attorney not that long ago who said, you could use a document management system, and as you were going along, have an individual area that was just for records requests. You're not going to put, obviously, your executive session minutes there, but it could be, an organized section electronically that you're just constantly adding to, so that when you get this record request, you're ready for it. So that can be a simple system, even available through, free Google Docs. You have a behind the scenes Google Docs account that the board is managing that allows you to keep those things organized. Or other document systems such as DocLang are also available. Okay, Amy, you had something else.
Well, I thought of one other thing. We've talked a lot about the membership list, and I feel like I could talk for an hour about the membership list too, but that's the only document, by the way, that members also have to state the purpose for which the membership list is requested. So, and it just has to be a purpose reasonably related to their interests as a member. So if it's, I sell candles and I want to solicit my neighbors, no, that's not a good reason. But if it's, I've got things to say about the board, yeah, unfortunately, that's reasonably related to their interest as a member. So the couple practice pointers I was thinking of in terms of other sort of tools in an association's arsenal that you may consider: a record retention policy. We've prepared those for associations before, just so you have an idea, especially if you're self-managed, how long you're going to hang on to certain things. And then you may want to think about a record request form for people to fill out. This is what I'm looking for. Now, that's gonna be very association dependent whether that makes sense. but that's another option.
Yeah, those are great. That's great suggestions. Definitely the record retention policy, because that helps keep you organized and, eliminates the, the storage from 40 years ago that, you're still holding on to stuff.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to quickly go through Firewise, because we still have our surprise topic. We want to get to all of your questions because it looks like there's a ton. So I'm not sure how many of you are Firewise communities or are considering being a Firewise community. Firewise USA is a volunteer program which provides a collaborative framework to help neighbors take action to reduce wildfire risk. So as we all know, in California, this is at the top of everybody's minds, especially, in this heat and this day and age. And for associations, it has become a major tool around insurance. So when I was at another conference, I was at an insurance seminar session, and they were talking about Firewise designation for associations, even general policies for common area. And they were saying in this session that, it's going to become not just about getting a discount, which it can provide a discount for individual homeowners if you're on, say, the California Fair Plan, but it may be the difference between maintaining or even obtaining insurance, as we are seeing across the board associations being dropped from insurance companies that are leaving California. So it is definitely a valuable tool for associations. And associations are readily built to handle the process because you already have the infrastructure. So communities at large can organize and become Firewise communities, but what we are hearing from local leaders is that associations are best equipped to be successful as Firewise communities. You already have a board, you already have a budget, you already have landscaping and infrastructure for maintaining your common area. So it is something that if you're not a Firewise community, definitely something to consider. It is administered by the NFPA, that is the National Fire Protection Association. They do other national electrical specifications, but Firewise falls underneath them. And it is a volunteer program. We talked a little bit about insurance. The other thing we're hearing is that fire insurance in the insurance industry may start to kind of move towards what we see like earthquake insurance, so that it is a separate rider policy. But until that time, associations right now are really struggling with tools to make sure that they can get insurance, and this is definitely one of them. Next slide. So there are some simple ways to become a Firewise community. There are basically 5 steps. You form a committee. Again, associations already have a board and a infrastructure for developing committees. You develop a risk assessment for your association, and there are tools through the NFPA and through online systems that say these are the biggest risks that we have in our association. We have overgrown common area, or all of our buildings don't have screens on their gutters. So you do a major risk assessment, and then you come up with an action plan that says these are the things we're going to do over the next few years to help reduce our risk of catastrophic fire. And then the 4th requirement is that you engage the community. You guys as board members know that sometimes that is always the hardest part, engaging the community around this. But I was having a discussion with a partner earlier that the message has to be, kind of along the lines of, don't ask what your community can do for you, ask what you can do for your community. And engaging owners to do just a little bit of their part by doing a risk assessment on their own home, trying to weed whack around their areas, cleaning their gutters, to engage the community in this process for the betterment of all is really the crux of the program. And then apply for recognition. And that is done actually through the NFPA with assistance from local agencies. And we can talk more about those in a second. Requirements for sustaining a fire-wise community. Once you are a fire-wise community, you're required to spend a certain amount of hours and dollars. And basically on a yearly basis, you have to spend $29.50 per home. Again, associations are already queued up to meet these requirements because you're most likely spending costs for maintenance for your common area. And many of those actually apply to that FireWise designation. You have to have an educational event, and that is encouraging, again, that homeowner interaction and engagement. You have to do some work on your action plan. You have to report to the NFPA every year and then renew every 5 years. So pretty easy requirements. And again, associations are already set up to be successful in those areas. Technology solutions. So in your local communities, many of you probably have fire safe councils. They are kind of the intermediary between the NFPA and what you're doing as a boots on the ground organization. County government solutions are available out there. CAL FIRE in many areas has solutions. The NFPA has their own portal with lots of information and tips. And then there are proprietary software solutions. And we're seeing in some areas that counties, like for example, Truckee, if any of you are in the Truckee area, counties who are embracing fire reduction education and action are signing up for software solutions that can apply to associations within their coverage area. So there are many solutions out there from a technology standpoint, and happy to try and connect you individually. You can email me if any of you have questions on that. All right, our surprise, and I think we're going to have to move quickly, huh?
Very quickly, because we're already over. So maybe we made a mistake adding the surprise. So
I know.
Transparency Act in 2 minutes. It does apply to associations. I think it's on the next slide, but the deadline for submitting the initial report is January 1, 2025. Our take is that all board members are beneficial owners, because beneficial owner is defined as someone with substantial control over important decisions. Well, the board makes 99% of the decisions for the association. So every board member is a beneficial owner under this law. I think we can probably skip, because everybody's going to get the PowerPoint. We can skip the basics. So we'll just go. I'll just offer 2 practice pointers that we've discussed. One is, as a matter of course, until and unless there are efforts, by the way, to get an exemption for associations to say this doesn't apply, but it may take time. Hopefully they will be successful, but as of now, it applies. So one practice pointer is, after you have an election of directors or a new director is appointed, just as a matter of course, you're going to be getting this information, legal name, date of birth, all that stuff from every director. And a good idea, and we haven't done this in-house, but I'm gonna incorporate it here, is in your election materials, include, if you are elected to the board of directors, you will be required to provide this information so that people know that this is part of your fiduciary duty in terms of complying with the law, and that includes providing this information, including if there's a change. In passport, driver's license, anything like that, that's all got to be disclosed in the event of any sort of change. So those are my practice pointers.
So just, just a brief kind of overhead. This Corporate Transparency Act was put into place so that the federal government could track finances for corporations. And the argument is that, it shouldn't really apply to associations. So I think they're trying really hard to make it not. But as Amy mentioned, as of right now, it does apply. I have done the process for our own corporation, and it's very simple. The hard part for you guys is going to be collecting this information from your board members.
Yeah.
Sorry, we went over.
Yeah.
No
so
problem.
much to discuss.
Okay, well, thank you, Sonia and Amy, for getting through the main chunk of the presentation. We're going to move into the Q&A section now. And just a reminder for everyone that is still here and listening to the presentation, you can upvote your favorite questions by going into the Q&A, hitting the little thumbs up in the bottom left-hand corner. Those questions will be answered first. And we're going to go ahead and do our first one. So we have a question here from Kathleen. She asks, what is an owner's recourse if the HOA refuses to release a document they are entitled to? Are there remedies other than meet and confer or a civil lawsuit?
Yes. It's one of the areas where there's a few areas, but this is but records requests are one of them, where a member can get a $500 civil penalty for every violation of the records request law. So in theory, if 10 types of documents were requested and none of them were provided, they could get 10 times $500 as a civil penalty.
Okay. And then it looks like Kathleen's got some great questions because she's also for the second one. Is there a master list you would be willing to share of the documents and categories that we should be retaining? I think we spoke about that before the meeting.
Yeah, so it would be a long list, but one thing that our firm has that may be helpful, and I said I'd be happy to provide it to Connor, is we have a disclosure checklist that's broken out by category. So we have everything that has to go in the annual budget report, everything that has to go in the annual policy statement, everything that has to be provided in an escrow request. And we don't have a list of all the documents in 5200, but I think we have that list floating around too. So if that would be helpful, we can certainly provide those to Connor.
Yeah.
And then I think you also mentioned that list splits it out for what is general delivery and what is individual delivery too, right?
That's a separate document, but we do have another document that lists the documents that you provide by individual delivery and those that you provide by general delivery.
Yeah. And just for everyone on the webinar, Amy has been gracious enough to provide that. So that'll be included in the post-event email, and it'll be somewhere that you can get to it easily and see it. Okay, next question. We have a question from Miles. Miles asks, what should a board do if there are documents that are simply missing or were lost to decades of time or a change in management company? Specifically, how does the board respond to a request for minutes that they can't produce?
You can't produce something that doesn't exist. You just do the best you can. I mean, anytime I've had that, I just said the association does not have documents responsive to this request. You can't provide something that isn't there.
Yeah, and I would assume they have to make that response within 10 days.
Yes. Well, depending on the time frame that we're talking about. Minutes is actually the time frame for minutes, which is more like 30 days. So yeah, but if you don't have them, you don't have them.
Just make sure you tell them that you don't have them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we have a question here from Lynn. Lynn asks, when does a California HOA board of directors have to provide notice, the notice of a membership or notice to the membership of a director's resignation?
There's no requirement to provide notice to the membership of a director's resignation.
Okay. That one's pretty cut and dry there.
I mean, you could, but you don't have to.
It's not required, but probably
Yeah.
a good idea to let people know what's happening.
I mean, it kind of depends on what's going to happen with that seat. Because the remaining directors can appoint someone to fill the seat. But depending on the timing of the election, it may make sense to fill that seat at the next election, and then you'd be telling people, oh, there's a position available because so and so resigned. But I've never had an association just say, FYI, Joe resigned.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll move on to the next question here. We have from Connie. Connie is part of a 12-member association, and they use personal email addresses to contact the other 12 members of the association, and a Google Drive that's accessible to those 12 members. Would you think that's appropriate?
Appropriate, probably. Legal, probably not. But the HOA police is, there isn't such a thing. So it's a risk assessment thing. I mean, in order to
what if they had the annual member solicitation form that said everybody agreed that each owner signed and said they wanted their information via email? Would that,
if they had that,
compliant?
Yeah, if they have that, sure. That was not my interpretation of the question. But no, if they have that, sure.
I'm trying to make it better.
No, I mean, to answer the question, the law requires that people consent to receive notices via email. Yeah. So if they haven't done that, then technically you're not in compliance. But in a 12-unit association, probably not a huge risk, but also not technically compliant.
Yeah. Connie actually put a little sub comment on here saying we do get permission.
Okay. So it's really, consent. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move to the next one. This is a question from Jeff. Jeff is an HOA member appointed as the inspector of a GovDoc amendment election. After receiving several sealed ballots, the board decided to cancel the election. The president is asking to be given the sealed ballots. Should I receive? Sorry, I'm trying to read through the rest of this question here.
Keep them as an independent member.
Yeah, if you see it in your Q&A there.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my first question for you, Amy. We always shied away from having an actual owner be the inspector of elections. Do you advise your boards and associations the same way?
I have had a change of heart about that.
Lovely.
I used to be of this at the same mind, but now I'm coming around to sort of, depending on the association, depending on the issue, that it may make good sense for a member to do it.
So especially in this, where it's not a director election, right? It's something that's a little more independent. Okay, love it.
Yeah, and the other part of Jeff's question here at the very end, he's asking, mostly as the inspector, should he just keep them for 2 years and not give them back, and meet the requirements that way, and then when that 2 years is up, give them back to the board?
Well, it's a really complicated question, actually, Jeff, but I love it because I'm an elections nerd. So I'm kind of thinking about this. So you didn't have a completed election. So technically, I don't think you have to really retain them at all, because it's not a valid election if you didn't get a quorum of ballots returned and they were never opened. And in terms of keeping them, if you were to keep them, the inspector is to keep them for a year and then turn them over to the association. But again, I think there's an argument to be made that you don't have to keep them at all, and they could be destroyed.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps, Jeff.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff. It's a pretty specific question, and I'm not supposed to give legal advice, so I apologize. But I just love elections so much I can't help myself.
We have another question from Lynn here with 7 upvotes. What can members do when the HOA won't list the HOA financial statements on the website? The HOA ignores member requests for financials as well. The HOA property management recently deleted the financial statements folder that was previously available on the website.
So no requirement that they be posted on the website, but required to provide them upon request from a member is the legal answer.
Yeah. So the way I interpret this is they're okay, they're within their bounds to take them off the website, but if you're requesting them, they still need to be providing them.
Correct. Correct.
Yep.
Okay. So we have a question here from Steve. Steve asks, is the HOA secretary responsible for maintaining the mailing list? Or is it a duty that you would outsource to a management company, and if you have a management company?
I'm confused about the term mailing list. I don't know if that means.
I would say probably the membership list.
Okay, so the question is, I'm sorry, but there's so many questions. I don't know where this one is. Can you repeat it?
Is the HOA's secretary responsible for maintaining the mailing list, which I think is membership list? Or if you have a management company, is this something that you would outsource to the management company?
Yeah, if there's a management company, usually that falls upon the management company to keep. I mean, usually the management company is the custodian of records for the association. So they're the appropriate entity to maintain that document as well as other association records. If there's no management company though, it still has to be kept. There's no law that says the secretary has to do it. It just has to be kept.
And then he had an additional part of this, which who's responsible for actually sending out the documents then in that case? It would be the management company, and if they don't have a management company, it would be the board.
Yeah, I mean, the requirement is that the association do it. So typically management companies are responding to records requests. Again, sometimes we will respond on behalf of clients to records requests if it's particularly, prickly. Or it's just really confusing or whatever, or it looks like there's going to be litigation or something like that. Sometimes we'll do it, but someone authorized by the association needs to do it.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I'm sorry, Sonia, I'm hogging all these answers.
No, they are questions for you. I would just add to, and that's I'm grateful you're here. Just in adding to that, if you're a self-managed board, you as a board split those responsibilities, right? So just because it seems like a secretarial responsibility doesn't mean that you couldn't have the vice president be in charge of managing that membership list, correct?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a question here from an anonymous attendee. Do lawsuits against the association have to be disclosed during real estate transaction disclosures?
The answer is no. They do not have to be. But again, it's a judgment call, and consult with legal counsel is my best advice on that one, because there's been situations where we have advised it and there are situations where we don't.
Perfect. We'll take a couple more questions here before we wrap up. I know there's a lot of questions in here. We're going as fast as we can with the time provided. That's why we use the upvote feature. So we have a question here from Clifford. Clifford asks, can a member request a list of all HOA bank account payments and transactions, including amounts paid and the parties that they were paid to?
Yes.
Good question.
It would not be. Let me see how it's described in 5200 though. They get the balance sheet, income and expense statement, and general ledger. And the general ledger is defined as a report that shows all transactions that occurred in an association account over a specified period of time. So that would be the one that applies.
Nope. And that is going to include all of those ins and outs of the regular checking account. So individual owner assessment payments and payments to your landscapers.
And your lawyers, which is often what they want to know.
There you go.
Okay, we have a question here from Evgeny. Does each board member need to file the CTA individually, or is it the association's responsibility?
Hi, Evgeny. Evgeny's on the board of one of my associations. It doesn't have to be done individually. The association is doing it because it's a corporate requirement. So the corporation is doing it.
So the corporation will then be required to collect that material.
Correct. And that's what we were saying is you probably want to think about some procedures where that, how you're going to collect that information to just make it a matter of course until and unless the CTA doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah, he had to
correct me if I'm wrong, but the penalty is $500 a day for every day that you do not file after January 1st, 2025.
That's correct. Now, I question what sort of enforcement entities are going to be able to go, oh, there's,
they're going to go
hundreds
check
of thousands of associations in the United States. How are they going to possibly do that? But technically, yes, that's correct.
They're going to go check all 53,000 HOAs in California.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's only in California. This is a nationwide requirement.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take one more question here, and then we'll go ahead and go into our ending announcements for today. We have Brian who asks, Brian wanted a clarification that they always have to solicit information or contact information annually. They always had a form in their packet, but was it always an annual requirement to update information yearly?
I can take this one if you want.
I
mean, the difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, the difference is now that you have to ask them about their communication preference, mail, email, both, or no preference. But there was a form previously that asked for a secondary address, that asked for any updated information. Is that correct, Amy? Is that the distinction?
That's correct. But he didn't even have to include that form. You just had to tell people that they had the right to request that notices be provided to a secondary address. So Brian, my answer would be, if you were doing it before, good job with your crystal ball and knew that this was going to be a requirement. And yes, you should update the form so that you're getting all the information you're required to get under Civil Code Section 4041.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Sonia and Amy, for answering those questions. We're going to go ahead and head into our ending announcements for today. Pull up my other sheet here. I want to say thank you to the ECHO members for coming today and supporting our ongoing ECHO webinars. For those of you who are not ECHO members, please consider becoming a member and supporting HOA boards throughout the country. To join, simply go to www.echo-ca.org and click on the membership tab. For ECHO members, thank you for supporting us, and please invite your friends, boards, and especially management firms and vendors to join ECHO. A simple invitation is often all it takes to encourage someone to join. If you would like to become more involved with ECHO, we have a couple opportunities that you may be interested in here. If you are interested in anything on this slide, please email Dave Zapponi. His email is at the bottom of the slide there if one of these takes your interest. Now we're going to head on to some of our other announcements. This year, ECHO launched its new educational program focused on HOA board preparedness. The core curriculum of 10 courses is designed for high-quality training and is available for HOA board members, interested homeowners, and professionals. Your participation in this program will earn you the Certificate of HOA Board Member Preparedness. The courses are initially offered live this year, but will be available via recording this year and next year. If you do miss a live program that you wanted to attend, you can always go and attend live at a later date. With that, we also have our ECHO resource panels. These will be coming back in the fall this year. We're going to be kicking it off with the Wine Country, North Bay, and San Francisco resource panels in September, starting on the 10th through the 11th. And we have our Sacramento, our T-Car panel, and our East Bay panels on the 17th, 18th, and 19th of September. We look forward to seeing you at those smaller in-person meetings. Speaking of in-person meetings, we have 2 larger meetings still planned for the rest of this year. We have our October 5th in-person seminar that will be in Laguna Hills in Southern California. So if you're in the southern part of the state and you can make it to that one, we would love to have you. And then we will do our annual meeting on November 16th, where we go over all the new laws that are going to be applying to HOAs in 2025 and a review of the legislative session and what happened this year. That's a great event. We host that at Rossmore in their event center. It's a great facility, and we look forward to having you there if you are in that area. Once again, I want to say thank you to all of our sponsors for today's presentation. I want to say thank you to Sonia and Amy for presenting this material. And I want to say thank you to all of you board members and professionals who joined us on this call today.